So we're evening it all up. We're getting it to where it blends. I'm using a little bit of a circular motion. I'm sacrificing some of my hair work, which means I'll have to come back in a little later and tidy that up and just kind of reinforce those hairs. Now, if I had this at a higher temperature, it would flash higher too, and that would mean I'd have to go back a lot more and do a lot of basically editing and revising and amending what I had just done, and I don't want to do that. I want to try to keep it. I'm trying to keep as many steps out of it as possible. Again, not being lazy, but being practical. The more you have to do something over and over, you know, it just is an illogical way to go. If you can do it in 1 or 2 swoops rather than 6 or 7 steps, I'd rather do it that way. It's just a lot easier, and it kind of keeps you from getting too frustrated or bored or feeling like you're not making headway with a piece. The biggest thing with this is that you can do a lot of work on this, and you know, if I showed the viewers, for example, you know, several hours worth of work, sometimes it doesn't even look very different. Like somebody will look at the before picture and then they'll look at what I've done now, and it doesn't look much changed, even though you could have spent several hours doing it. If I'm working in the dark area by the tree branch, for example, or by the tree trunk, for example, a lot of the detail work that gets done over there is lost. So you can look at the piece and it doesn't really look much different. So to the casual viewer, it's like, oh, this guy's just posting, tons of pictures, and there's not really any difference in them, you know. But as an artist and as a person there working with the piece directly, you can see the obvious differences where you've darkened it up, where you've changed the tone, where you've added X amount of hundreds of hairs, where you have texturized something, where you have added grain to wood or shadow lines, or, you know, deepened something in. It's a very, very slow process, and again, that's why it requires patience. ADHD people will hate this. So, well, I don't fancy that if you are an ADHD person that if you have attention deficit disorder, you probably are not watching this video anyway. I probably lost you at the first onset, and you're probably off doing something else. That's what I would imagine. Anyway, not to pick on them, my younger brother went through that, so I'm not going to pick on anybody that's got an inability to sit still and watch things. But definitely, this is not the art form for you if that's how you do things in your life. You have to be able to sit still for this, or well, I shouldn't say that. You could actually do this art form, but just realize that it's going to take you a very, very, very long time to do if you can't keep at it for a while. And therein is the challenge. You know, you have to be able to sit with it, to stick with it, and to work on it. You know, it's not something that you can do once one day and then come back a week later and do a little bit more. And I mean, you can do it that way. It's just going to take you a long, long time. This piece is a very, very large piece. I don't usually work on something quite this large. This is 4 feet by 2 feet, so it's a very, very large piece. However, most of the pieces that I work on are in the 1 foot by 2 feet range at the most, or oftentimes a lot smaller. So I've been branching out into larger pieces, and the reason I'm doing that is because I want to actually get more detail into my work, and it's really kind of an optical illusion. I'm getting the same amount of detail regardless of whether it's a small or a large piece. The difference is that on a small piece, when you put it before a camera, you go ahead and you take your pictures of it and you load it up on the internet. The expansion of the piece is not that great because the original size is not much bigger than the screens on many computers, and oftentimes the original pieces on some of these smaller plaques is actually smaller than a computer screen. So when you expand it, you're not expanding it very large, and as a consequence, you only get the amount of detail that's shown in the piece. With this particular piece, because it is a huge piece, because it's such a large piece of wood, When I download an image from a photograph, and I then go ahead and I upload it to the computer, you see it as a small box. And so with this greatly reduced, the more you reduce a picture, the more detailed it becomes, or at least visually there's more for your eye to see. It becomes more and more photographic, so it looks more detailed, you know, by actually reducing it. For years I saw phenomenal wood burns by Julie Bender, who's just an outstanding artist. She's a pyrographic artist, one of the best. I mean, absolutely one of the best. And she does animals, a lot of horses, dogs, all sorts of media. She does buffaloes and cows and deer and, you know, squirrels, you name it. Julie's a really fantastic artist. She's just somebody I very greatly admire. And anyway, she does these really intricate, detailed works that are just jaw-dropping. One of the things, though, that I found out when I started to look at her pieces was that Julie does a lot of very large pieces. Not huge, but she does some big pieces. And I think that that's a very smart way to go, because as I looked closer at Julie's pieces that originally floored me, and it's not that they don't still, but as I looked at some of them, I began to realize that some of the detail that I was drooling about was not quite as detailed as I had thought it was. It was just simply a matter that the image had been such a big image to begin with, that it had really shown up with as a phenomenally detailed piece. And of course, when you shrink it down to photo size, it looks a lot more intricate. And so when I actually got to look at the pieces up close and see the size of the pieces, I realized that the work wasn't any different than mine. It wasn't any more intricate than mine. It was actually bigger than mine. And therein it was. So I thought, well, you know, Julie does this with success, and several of the other artists do this with success, and it really looks good, and I wanted to try to go ahead and do some larger pieces to really showcase the amount of detail that goes in, because I put a lot of work into these things. And as a result, you can see this has been a big hit. I've got some other stuff in mind, some other projects I want to work on once this one is completed, and we'll have to see how those go, because I have just a plethora of different things kind of lined up. And I'm always looking to do something that's a little more unusual. The reason I chose this particular line, for example, is because it is a subadult male. A lot of people have asked me about the spotting on the fur. And the thing about subadult males is that they haven't lost the juvenile spotting. It's not as predominant as it is in a cub, but they do retain that spotting pattern. And they do this, the coat will continue to have that spotting pattern up until the lion matures. You know, once it gets a little bit more mature, then what happens is the spots will vanish from the animal entirely, and you get the tawny adult coat that has no spots whatsoever. But while it's still a young lion, it has this spotting in the coat. And obviously some of these spots are a little bit darker than what they will be. I'm going to come back in fact, that's something I can show you here in a moment, but I'm going to come back in and lighten out some of those spots. They're not going to be that same darkness. They are going to be a little bit lighter in the coat, because they are lighter in the image as well. Like all these spots right here are going to get lightened out along the shoulder. There's a lot of spotting right in there. It's a little bit dark, and some of these are real dark. Down in the legs, they actually are darker, and I'm not going to mess with those as much. But these spots up here are very, very dark and very pronounced, and those will be actually lightened out. Those are not going to be as prominent. Now, you know, I have a little bit more work to do in the head too up here, but we'll get to that towards the end when I'm working on the shading rather.